work. And one of the things I get to do as a part of my job is to interact with what we call our extension ministries, and Parents Reconciling Network is one of those. It's a group of dedicated and passionate parents and family members who have LGBTQ plus children, young adults, people in their lives that they want to support and come alongside. And so this space has been something we've been doing over COVID and now beyond, as we continue to want to learn and to engage and to support and grow together. And so we highlight a number of speakers and topics so that we can do, in fact, that, to learn and grow and support each other. So I am very, very thrilled to welcome today's speaker, who is going to engage with us about her work and just where her intersections are with the church and what's going on in the life of the denomination. So I know that it will be a wonderful conversation for all of us to witness and to be a part of. And so Garlinda Burton, I want to welcome you. Thank you so much for coming and joining us in this virtual space. And just as we get started today, I would love it if you would just introduce yourself a little bit before I have my first question that we engage with one another today.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I see a lot of extended family here, people that I count as family and extended family, so I want to welcome them. My name is Garlinda Burton. I am a deaconess in the United Methodist Church. I am fifth generation United Methodist on both sides from the Western North Carolina Conference originally. I'm now in the Tennessee Western Kentucky Conference. I work for the General Commission on Religion and Race right now as Director of Resource Development, but I have worked for the General Church for 42 years. And so I am just happy to be here. I love my church most of the time, but I always have questions. So I always have questions. Why do we do that? Why are we not doing that? So
that's a place that we often are together as well. So I appreciate your honesty and transparency there. And that's exactly what we hope to kind of dive into a little bit together today, is just to reflect a little bit about what is going on in the life of the church. We all know that there's a strain, a pull, a struggle. We can name it 1,000 different things, and we'd all be correct with our own experiences that we bring. So just to kind of dive in a little bit more of what you do. So for those that aren't maybe as familiar with what does the Commission of Religion and Race do, could you share with us a little bit more about your daily work, what it looks like, what you focus on? And then hopefully a fun question in the midst of it is, what do you enjoy most about what you get to do?
Love it. So the General Commission on Religion and Race is one of 11 program agencies of the worldwide church. And our job, and we were created in the late 60s, early 70s, is to help the church build the capacity to reach more young people, more diverse people, by addressing institutional and systemic racism, xenophobia, and also intersections of oppression. But our primary focus is on anti-racism work. The church is struggling with that, as we always have been. In the United States, we're still 93% white as a denomination, even though our denomination, our population is becoming more and more diverse. And so we have our work cut out for us with that. My daily work is developing resources and doing training and having conversations with people about how to address and confront racism well from a faith-based perspective, how to move from being nice and quiet and not seeing color to addressing racism in a way that will eradicate it so that we can get on with the business of transforming the world in the name of our Christ. My favorite thing to do, I have such a bias, but I was born and raised in the Women's Society of Christian Service, which became United Methodist Women, which is now United Women in Faith. And I love working with United Women in Faith. I love working with all people, but my favorite thing about my particular job is working with United Women in Faith, because even though we're getting older and we're, like the rest of the church, having trouble reaching young people, I think United Women in Faith still have a vision of a world that is more including and more diverse. And so I love working with my United Women in Faith sisters. And my second thing is I love working with young people. I am a field education supervisor at Vanderbilt Divinity School, and I'm also on the Wesley Foundation board at Tennessee State University. So I get my energy from young people. So.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit. Obviously, in your job, you interact with a ton of people. So you're a part of a whole lot of conversations. One of the things that you and I just spoke about with one another is some of the conversations that you've been hearing, maybe particularly lately, or, maybe these have been conversations that you've been a part of for many years leading up to kind of where we find ourselves at this present moment. But we were talking about conversations that you are hearing and a part of with people who are in different theological spaces, whether or not you want to label it as progressive or conservative or however that gets expressed. But recognizing the current struggle and tension that we're in with one another, I would love to hear you just talk with us, share with us, reflect with us about what do you feel like is the role of grace for all of us to consider and wrestle with in this moment. Speak a word about grace in the struggle, what this moment is, and what you're seeing in the conversations you're a part of, if you would.
I was telling Emily the other day, y'all. So there are a group of pastors in a particular annual conference who are trying to disaffiliate. And for those of you who have not been following, are leaving the United Methodist Church to join another denomination, a new denomination, because they are weary of the conversations that we're having about the status and role of LGBTQ family. And most of them are against ordaining and allowing LGBTQ family to marry. That's the presenting conversation. So most of these people who are leaving the denomination are leaving because they disagree and they think we need to stop talking about it because according to them, the Bible says this and we don't need to talk about it anymore. And so the fact that we're continuing to talk about it means we may be open to a different way of being, and they're leaving. So this particular group in an annual conference was very concerned that they were being treated badly. And their idea of being treated badly was that people in higher positions were sort of telling them that they were being disloyal to the United Methodist Church, making, and I'm using their language, making it difficult for them to leave. Not being gracious, that was the word that they used. And how are we, what is our call? It got me to thinking, what is our call? What is grace calling us to do if we disagree with folks? And if, as we disagree, how can we part with grace? And one of the struggles, I don't have a lot of answers, I just have questions. So one of my struggles is when we talk about grace, it feels like our history has been that marginalized people and people who stand for marginalized people are often, it feels to me, are often asked to extend grace when grace is not extended to them. And I'll give you an example. I am a scion of the old central jurisdiction. If some of you are not familiar, the United Methodist Church, the Methodist Church split over slavery, came back in 1939. The Southern Church and some Northerners did not want to integrate African Americans into wanted to have a separate judicatory. And so a separate Black judicatory was created, legally segregating African Americans in the church to the central jurisdiction. And some of my family was so frustrated with the continuing racism of the United Methodist Church that they became Baptists. So our family split. Some of us stayed to be United Methodists and some of us went to become Baptists. And we're still family and close, but just split. And when in merger, when we came back together and then you were merging with the Methodist Church and the former Evangelical United Brethren Church, there were still some folks who did not want to desegregate the church. And some parts of our church did not desegregate until the 70s. And what Black people were asked at that time was to extend grace, to not be angry, and to extend grace and trust to the segregationists in the church, that forgiveness was preached and grace. And so I come from that history of where marginalized people are asked to be much more gracious than the legal segregation, that the segregationists that happened. And remember, the Methodist Church didn't just agree with the secessionist movement around slavery. They were instruments of the Southern secessionist movement. The Southern Baptist Church, the Methodist Church South were key players in affirming slavery as their God-given right, and even saying that enslaving Black people was not contrary to the will of God, and using the Bible to say that. So all that is to say that now we find ourselves in a similar situation where we have some people who, in my opinion, are using scripture in a way that others, people who are LGBTQ plus, and they want to leave. And I hate for my church to split, but sometimes we got to do what we got to do. And they want to leave. And I agree that we ought to be gracious to one another, but are they extending grace? When you say a whole group of people are not worthy of the same consideration as people of God. And so my struggle is there, how do you extend grace, but also stand for what you believe in? And, so it's really a struggle, because as a Christian, I want to turn the other cheek. I want to extend grace. But I got two cheeks. And after that, I'm ready to fight. I'm not a pacifist. I'm trying to be. And what do we do with the notion that we are to stand with those who are marginalized and pushed to the margins? Is it grace, or are we supposed to let injustice slide? And I think that's the struggle that we're having. I don't want to extend hatred to my family that are leaving. I don't want to demean them and dehumanize them, but I disagree with them, and I disagree with them on theological grounds. And so I think that's the struggle, that there's a difference between extending grace to people. I think our Christ extends grace to us, but not saying it's okay to do what you're doing. And so I think that's probably where most of us are. And when you're a parent, grandparent, supporter of a person who's being marginalized, or if you're being marginalized yourself, it is really difficult to take the high road, because it's very personal to those of us who have been pushed to the margins. And when you've been pushed consistently, we've had this clobber language about our LGBTQ family since 1972. That's a doggone generation, or a couple of generations. And so how much grace are we to extend? And I think that's the struggle. That's the struggle. Now, the other side of the coin is, and Emily's heard me talk about this, we who defend some of our folks who are pushed to the margins are also challenged to ask ourselves, are we as gracious to all people pushed to the margins, or do we just have our own flavor? And this is where a lot of my work is. And having been a part of Reconciling Ministries, they've heard me on this subject. A lot of the Reconciling Ministries work around the United Methodist Church has been very focused on white middle-class folk. And I run in a whole circle of people of different colors and classes who are LGBTQ who don't get the support. One of my colleagues and Emily's colleagues, Helen Ride, and I have this conversation all the time about how we are working, how do we work with our reconciling ministries folks, our allies for LGBTQ rights on also addressing racism and sexism and classism and xenophobia. And so the challenge, I think, is to extend grace sufficient to all of us to understand that we all fall short, but to stand when we need to stand. And that's, I admit, I don't have, like I said, I don't have answers. I just have questions.
I appreciate that about the way that you frame all of this. And I join with you, and there are a lot of questions without sometimes we try to answer it in a way that I think falls short of really listening to each other. And so thank you for sharing as you are and do. And you have a lot of wisdom in everything you shared as well.
Just questions.
Well, it's thank you for asking those questions. I hope we can do more of that. So I do want to, in a minute, I have another question that I'd like to kind of circle back to, related to the last part of what you were sharing, intersectional justice. But first, I would love a word that you have used, and that I think many of us are familiar with, is the idea of othering. And so I wonder if you could say what this means to you, and how you feel like it affects the way we communicate and relate to each other. Like, what role does that play in our structure, in our lives of faith? Could you talk about that for a moment?
Hey, I was looking at I'm a TikToker, and I was looking at a TikTok video about, and it was 6 ways that people make snap judgments about one another and how they act that out. And so we all, I think most people, as part of our defense mechanism, the way we were raised, our implicit biases are there. And when we see something or someone, we make a judgment. We make a judgment based on our own safety. We look for places of affinity with that other person. We notice differences. So I think it's very natural to do that. I think the challenge for us as Christians, and what I struggle with, and this is my lifelong work for me, is to see the face of God in people in everybody that I encounter, and see kinship. I have started to call people fam, even when they're not my blood family. That's something I got from the young people. What up, fam? What up, family? Because I have a tendency to other. I grew up in segregation. I had a lot of negative encounters with white folks, but I had a lot of positive encounters. I grew up in a basically Black-white community, and now I navigate a community that is multicultural, that is teaching me so much more. I was raised in a monolingual environment, and where we spoke English, and that was all. And now I live and work and love in a community where people speak different languages, and not just different, like Spanish, English, Korean, but also speak different languages when we're speaking English. Like I said, I'm learning a whole new language from my children, the slang that they use, and they just roll their eyes when I use it, but it's still kind of fun. I'm trying to learn, to understand where they're coming from. And so I think the othering part is when we see people as less than children of God like us. That it's just that simple. It is very difficult for me to dislike and dishonor someone once I embrace them as fam. It really is. And I mean, I make a conscious effort, and I'm not always successful at it. If you all have been following what's been going on in the Tennessee legislative folk have not been fam this week. They have not been fam. And but I try to do that because I think for me, othering means that I don't see the face of God in other people. I don't see their humanity and their, their image of Godness in them. And I think that's the struggle that we have. Somebody just put in chat, you don't have to like everybody. Well, you don't have to like everybody, but you got to love everybody. And that's the hard part for me. We're supposed to love one another as Christ loved the church, as God loves us. That's hard for me because I can hold a grudge for a geological age. I mean, there's some folks I hadn't spoken to since the 20th century. So, and we're in 21, but I'm working on it. And I think in the church, we many times don't even teach. We talk about loving one another, but we don't teach how that is supposed to be. We don't talk about race in a very forthright way. We don't talk about sexuality and gender identity in a very forthright way. It's mostly don't ask, don't tell. I don't see color. I don't see difference until it smacks us in the face. And then we don't know how to deal with it. We don't see class differences, even though we do. Many of us are engaged in ministries of charity instead of justice. When John Wesley said that we are to be in relationship with people across class lines, we'd rather open a clothes closet only or do a food pantry, which are nice things, but that's not being in relationship in a way that we bear one another's burdens and that we learn from one another. And so I think that whole othering piece is, can we see the face of God in one another and touch that part emotionally and spiritually in a way that makes it harder for us to dismiss and declaim one another.
Thank you for sharing that. So we have a lot of parents of LGBTQ plus I say kids, and I know for many of you, you might have young adults or just plain adults at this point, or you may be a loved one of someone who identifies as queer or trans. And I will say, speaking back to just the realities of, particularly in the U.S., the majority of the United Methodist Church in the U.S. being middle class white still, as that still represents, as you noted and shared, the reconciling community as well. So I wonder if you could help us think along the lines of, when for many parents on this call, they identify as cisgender straight white, which is not everybody. So I'm not claiming that for all of us, but when you find yourself in a majority and you're wanting to support and walk alongside and journey with someone who identifies in some form of a minority, whether or not that be class, race, queer, trans, there's a number of other ways that we identify that would be a minority within the United Methodist Church. Is there a word of, I'm going to call it advice, that you would give to those who truly, deeply want to support, but reality is that those individuals are in the majority? How do we do that well?
Sure. It's an excellent point. I know that for many of us who love younger people who are LGBTQ, a lot of our advocacy began because it was our child, our nephew, our brother, our sister. And that is a way to become awakened when it affects our families, when it affects our inner circle. And that's one way to become active, and one way to become enlightened. I think For others of us, though, everybody is somebody's child. And so that's the first thing, you know, it's fine if you're in advocacy because it was your child, your nephew, but have you expanded that circle of advocacy to include other people? Maybe that was your awakening point, but have you stepped beyond your own family? And I'm assuming that some of you are, because you're on this call, that your advocacy has expanded to be aware of other people. I would say it's very similar with other people who are othered in our society. It is when you see injustice, when you become aware of it, find ways to become involved. And the first word is you got to step way outside your comfort zone. Just got to start by learning. You know, we have people in Tennessee this week who had no idea about the racism that has been going on in Tennessee for centuries, until they saw this very stark example of 3 people standing up, 2 African-American, actually Justin Jones is African-American and Filipino, but seeing 2 of them and then 1 white woman, and the white woman not losing her seat, and the other 2, they were just stunned. Just people were stunned, particularly white people were stunned. Well, people of color in our state have experienced this all along. The median household income for Black and Hispanic families in Nashville is about 30 to 40% less than white families. Black people and Hispanic people, particularly men, are 3 times more likely to go to jail than white people. In terms of policing, traffic stops, you know, the policing, there's more likely to be, you know, a stop on a man of color than there is on a white man. People of color know this. But this was such, and the number of, I'm on the Metro Action Human Relations Commission, the number of licenses given to white businesses to start is about 10 times that of businesses of color. We know this. So one of the things is to become aware of what is going on in your community. Where are the pinch points? One thing is to partner with a church of color and hear what their concerns are. And it doesn't have to be a United Methodist Church. Do you have a partnership or a consortium with churches of color where you all are hearing each other's concerns? That's just one way, is to begin by learning what's going on beyond your bailiwick, because part of what systemic racism does is make people of color and our concerns invisible. It's a part of what systemic classism is to bury people who are poor and hide them in communities, build around them, run them out of their communities. You know, part of what happens to LGBTQ people is they become invisible, you know, they become invisible. So that's the first thing I would say, is you have to force yourself to learn. And that it will require being in a learning relationship with people of color, not going in with answers, going in with humility and say, I don't know what I don't know, and I want to learn. So that's how I would start.
Thank you. That is very helpful and direct in a way that kind of gives, I feel like, something to chew and to hang on to. So I appreciate your sharing in that way. So many next places I want to go, but I think kind of there's 3 things I don't want to miss before our time is over. So I'm going to try to shape this. So in what you just shared, my next kind of thought and then question with that is that very often, particularly with this group of people, it is an active, engaged, wanting to do something kind of group of people, and many of them very much are engaged and leading in their annual conferences and churches. And I am so thrilled to hear some of the stories of what people are working on, but that mentality of we all want to do something, to make a change, to do something. What would you say is, I don't want to say most important because it's hard to put, a rank on things, but what do you feel like is important for us to do right now?
With regard to, is there?
Thank you for asking that clarification. I kind of have all this in my head.
Yeah, because
So
I got 10,000 things that we
right.
could do.
I think maybe going back to that earlier, grace in the struggle, kind of with that particular kind of subject in mind. What's important for us to do in the midst of the struggle right now?
I think self-work is very important before, and I don't mean navel gazing where we just stay there. I tell people all the time, a book study is not anti-racism. A talking group is not anti-homophobia and heterosexism or transphobia. A book study and a talking group is not going to do it. However, I think some self-learning is very important, self-awareness. There is a shameless plug. The Commission on Religion and Race has an online course called Implicit Bias, What We Don't Think We Think. And I think part of why we're stuck as a predominantly white, predominantly middle-class American church is because we think we're further along than we are. We think we know more than we know. Even those of us who have been in these struggles for a long time forget what we don't know, and there are new expressions of things. I'm going to pick on my sister Susan Smalley from Alaska. We had a conversation with Alaska United Women of Faith last year, and we were talking about, for example, supporting Native-owned businesses. That was just something that I said, we need to put your money where your mouth is. That's one thing I do try to do. If as much as I can, I don't give money to people who hate my people. And so that means if you're not treating Black folk well, if you're not treating Asian folk well, if you're not treating Native folk well, if you're not treating LGBTQ folk well, you're not getting my money. Now, I can't do that with everything. It's almost impossible. I can't check everything, but I do a little, I try to give my money to places that are supporting my people. And I can't all, and most people are my people. So where was I going with that? I think the self-learning is very important. The first thing to do is understand your own biases, because we have them. Even in our zeal to do right, we have a bias. It's not that you have to eradicate your bias, but just be aware of it when you approach when you go into the room. And so that would be the first thing that I would say is approach your bias and then do some learning about what you don't know. If you're concerned about, critical race theory, let's just say, throw that out there, learn what it is and what it isn't, and go into the school system, go to a school board, equipped with what you want to say and what you want to do, but learn about it first. If we're having a big fight in Tennessee about trans health for young people. And a lot of people are, a lot of our conservative brothers and sisters are against it and don't even know what it is. It just has the word trans on it and they're done. And they may be that way anyway, but we who are supportive of the Health Act need to know what it says and what it doesn't say too. So learning instead of just going by buzzwords and sound bites. And that requires some work. And then as Christians, we need to continue to revisit the teachings of Christ. Nobody is beyond the love of God. Nobody is. And we got to keep telling ourselves that, because we'll go in and read some stuff and say, oh, gotcha, this person I can marginalize. No, you can't. No, you can't. You're not Jesus. You need to have a seat.
Amen.
So, yeah.
Thank you. So I want to return to the topic of intersectional justice. And one of the things that I appreciate that you have articulated clearly is just the reality that one is that the church often doesn't do this well, which is to have the understanding and awareness of literally the different intersections that people carry in their lives, who they are, and that means a lot of different things. So I wonder if first you could just talk a minute about what is intersectionality, intersectional justice work, and why does it matter, which I think is clear just in almost defining it. But then the next step of that I really want to get to, that just is kind of a framing for this next part, is how do you feel like that this plays out in the life of the church in both positive and negative ways? Like I know that you have a lot of experience with ways that work is being done in a really beautiful and transformative, positive ways. And I'd love to hear you if you have a story or example or two. But then also help us to hear what some of the negative effects are and how that continues to plague our faith, our witness, our connection with God, with one another, because that is real as well. So if you could talk to us about intersectional justice, why does it matter? But then particularly, how does it play out in the life of our church in positive and negative ways?
Well, of course, intersections of identity and also oppression mean that we walk into the world in different ways. So I'll use myself as an example. I am African American, I am Southern, I am a senior citizen, I am a Christian, I am middle class, I am college educated. So I present in the world in that way. And we don't like to say this. A lot of us don't like to say, and I'm also heterosexual. So I walk in the world with some privilege because of that. I am American born. I speak English. I can walk through this world with my education, my middle class privilege, and some of those things. I'm a homeowner, those kinds of things that give me privilege. But I also walk in the world as an African American woman in a society that others women many times and others African Americans in other ways. There's the reality of age discrimination. It has hit me now that there is a discrimination that comes from trying to apply for a job when you're in your late 60s, early 70s. And so the understanding is that people present in the world walk into the world in different ways, and that some of that implicit bias hits in many different ways. A person who presents as more feminine or more masculine oftentimes has an easier time than someone who presents as more queer or gender non-conforming. And so they can walk into a room and not immediately be judged and treated as different, whereas a person can pass. It's like passing. Back in the day, lighter skinned Black people could pass for white, and that would afford them some privilege if they did not ever say that they were Black. That could happen. Same thing with people who are gender nonconforming versus those who present in more traditionally feminine, masculine ways. And so in the church, just like in society, we tend to make very snap judgments about who people are. And we tend to assume that people are our kinds of people or not our kinds of people by how they present, how they speak, how they look, how they talk. One of my colleagues, Elaine Moy, is from Manhattan. She's from New York, and she is the stereotypic fast-talking, rough New Yorker, but she's Chinese American, and she as American as the rest of us. And but we go places and people assume that she's not from here. as they say, where are you from? They'll say your English is so great. Where are you from? And I just cringe because I know she's going for their throat. She goes, I'm from New York City with that New York accent. It's like, don't hurt them, Elaine, don't hurt them. But, in reality, in our church, we are often not sensitive to the nuances of intersectionality, and we act out of our ignorance and our first perceptions of where people, we act out, we present, we do things based on where they're from. A negative example, I used to attend a church called Hobson. It was an interracial church, and our pastor, when I first joined, was a white woman named Janet Wolfe. Janet got all kinds of accolades that she deserved for taking this inner city church to a new level. And she was this crusading white woman who was working with poor Blacks, poor Hispanics, poor whites, and all of that. And it was an interracial church. Well, the person who came after her was an African-American man who was just as crusading, just as dynamic, but all of a sudden we became a Black church and were treated very differently because the pastor was African-American versus this crusading white woman, who was on the road for justice. Well, he was just another Black pastor dealing with his Black congregation. And quite frankly, many of our white folks left the congregation when it was no longer led by a white woman. So that's a kind of a negative story about how we deal with intersectionality. I think a more positive one that we also need to watch is we are becoming aware now that race is not just a Black-white construct, that our LGBTQ, in our denominational rhetoric, we talk about homosexuality. And at the time when the Book of Resolutions first put the clobber language in, it was just about homosexuality. And I think all of us are gaining a new understanding of the breadth of that community. And I think even in the LG community, there is some struggle sometimes to understand asexuality and transgender issues. I think we're all trying to do that. And I think what happens is we sometimes play this game of, we call it oppression Olympics. Well, my oppression is worse than yours. Well, you people of color want to talk about this, but we do this too. Or you women want to talk about this, but we have this too, instead of working together. And we have some places in the church who think because they're working on one set of oppressions that they are automatically woke, if I may use that word, about other sets. That's why we have racism in the LGBTQ advocacy community. That's why we have homophobia and sexism many times among people of color. That's why we have classism in many of our communities. That's why we have xenophobia. We have US reared people of color who make fun of people who are fresh off the boat and tell people that they need to assimilate. I mean, we say that to Black folks, say it to African folk, Asian American folks say it to New Asian folk. We other each other instead of recognizing those intersections of oppression and identity where we should work together. So I think a positive note is that we're understanding and recognizing that there are lots of intersections where people are experiencing discrimination, but also claiming their identity in wonderful ways. But it also challenges us to break free from it's either this or that understanding of people. We are complex human beings. And the issues that are facing our church and our world are complex. And we can't face a multicultural, multicolored, multitudinal set of challenges in our world with our Black and white thinking. And many of us want to keep it Black and white. It's either this or that. And the church, particularly those of us that are older, have got to get with it.
Yeah. See a rainbow of colors, see the gray, yes, I thank you.
Yeah.
What a powerful response. Thank you for diving into that, because I confess and share that this is something that I need to do better in, and learn as well. And I would offer and say that Reconciling Ministries network needs to do more work and greater awareness, and we're doing some of that internally, as well as seeking to also provide some leadership and some direction, and are so grateful for the witness and partners of many of our different agencies who have been doing this work in a multitude of levels, and in conversations for a long time, paving the way. We're just trying to get better at really listening and seeing and hearing each other as well. So thank you for those words of both encouragement, inspiration, and witness of some positive ways that we can do that. So this last question is simple in some ways, but also incredibly complex and not easy. And it really is me wanting to ask about your hope for the future of the church. And I, church can be the United Methodist Church, and I also mean it broadly too, that we are all God's people, but particularly in our denomination right now. And Cynthia, I do see your question, and I want to incorporate this into this last question, because I wonder, and Garland, I would love for you to kind of help us to hear what some of your thoughts are in this way, but it kind of speaks back to, we all want to do something. What does doing something look like? How do we create a different future for the church if we really do want to recognize and see each other and worship alongside each other? Is that a possibility? What does that look like? I know that that's maybe a whole nother conversation of honoring the legacy and the history of Black churches. It's not for white churches to come and say, we want some Black people or people of color to come and join our congregation, but us to understand a different way of being church together. And I just wonder, with what we are experiencing now, do you see an opportunity or a way that we do establish and maybe transform our own churches to be more diverse, to include each other in a different way? What does that look like? Is that, the hope and the future of the church? What do you see for us? And I'd love for you to answer personally on this, is to in a way that you feel comfortable with. But just to kind of leave us with, what is your hope for the future of our church?
I still believe that God has work for us to do. And I don't know if that us is going to be the United Methodist Church. I don't know if we're going to be who we are now. And that's okay with me. We started out as a movement to reform the Anglican Church and became a denomination. And I don't think that's even what John Wesley had envisioned or wanted. And it may be that there will be a renewal movement that changes who we are. That's okay with me. I think that God has work for us to do. I still think that those of us who follow Jesus Christ have a word to speak, a word of hope, and a word of transformation for the better in this world. I believe that with my whole being. And I think that there are congregations that are modeling that, and they are not the places that say, come and join our place. They are places that people can see themselves and their concerns being addressed. There's a church, Christ Crossman in Falls Church, Virginia, is one of my friends, JP Hong, is the pastor there. It is a multiracial church. They have all kinds of people there, but they are in community with and standing with people, homeless folk and LGBTQ folk and immigrants, and their Christian faith includes not othering those folks. They see that as a part of the ministry of Jesus Christ. And those are the places where people can see themselves and be invited to be a part of something great that and great doesn't have to be big. It's not a big church. So I just believe that. And I think as we continue to seek to be faithful and to tear down walls, and we got to work on it every day when we tear down walls within and around us, that God will use us in ways that we can't even imagine. And it may not look like what we think. It may not be within our church walls. Some churches may have to die. Some of our institutionalism may have to die. Agencies may have to die, but I think God will continue to use God's people. And that's what gives me hope. If I can, as much as I'm a United Methodist, if I can just cling to the understanding that in whatever incarnation we are, we can be a community of faith and God can use us to do mighty things, I think we'll be fine. I think when you hang on too tight to what has been, to the cloak of denominationalism, and God knows I am 5th generation United Methodist on both sides, but I just believe that if we can open ourselves up to God and listen to what God has for us, even if it feels uncomfortable, that we can do greater things than God has even done so far.
What a beautiful benediction to this time. Garlinda, thank you so much. You are awesome and
Oh,
amazing, and I really deeply appreciate you sharing your spirit and your wisdom with this group. We are truly appreciative of the work that you do individually and with the church expansively. And yes, I will let us go forth and be uncomfortable, right? I'm going to take that from our conversation today.
yeah. Be
Um,
resurrection people, and it's not always comfortable.
Amen. Amen. So Garlinda, thank you again so much for your time sharing it with us this space today. And we hope to have you back in again in another capacity or just to continue this conversation. We're all a work in progress.
If you need me, you can find me at the General Commission on Religion and Race website. I'm glad to support in any way, or if you have ideas for me, please let me know. I'm always looking for new ideas for resources. And you need to know that Reconciling Ministries has gotten a grant to do Vacation Bible School curriculum for young people. I'm very excited about that. And GCOR is working on an anti-racism Vacation Bible School / Sunday school curriculum for children. My thesis is that we need to start earlier talking about race.
Yes.
And so we're working on it. We're going to pilot a children's curriculum this summer, just letting you know.
It's beautiful. Thank you so much, Garlinda. Take care. Blessings, everyone. And we'll talk to you all again soon.
God
Bye.
bless. Bye.